born of poison, fire, and ice. Theta 9 was a place where nothing soft survived. The planet's atmosphere was a choking mixture of methane and ozone. Its ground jagged, volcanic crust split by glaciers that never fully melted. Acid rain fell regularly. Storms rolled with enough static to fry most electronic systems. Predators weren't born here. They were forged. And among them, the Cathar stood alone at the top. 10 feet tall, encased in bone-plated armor that grew from their own bodies. They had lungs adapted for toxic gas and muscles dense enough to punch through steel. The Cathar didn't just survive Theta 9, they ruled it. And now they ruled much of the outer spiral arm of the galaxy, where tales of their brutality preceded them. High Commander Sharnak stood on the edge of the Razor Plateau, his secondary eyes scanning the roiling horizon. He didn't wear armor. He didn't need it. His flesh was tougher than most war steel. His body bore the scars of 100 planetary campaigns, but no Cathar had ever bested him, and none ever would. He turned as a young warrior approached, smaller and cautious. "Speak," Sharnak growled, voice like crushed gravel. "High Commander, we've detected a vessel entering our system. It doesn't match any known signatures. Its trajectory leads straight for our warm moon." No response to hails. "They are human." Sharnak paused. Human. The word was unfamiliar on his tongue. "Yes, a species from the Sol sector." Deathworld drated. At that, Sharnak's brows lifted. It wasn't often another Deathworld species appeared, much less ventured into Cathar territory without permission. Either they were fools, or they were making a statement. "Prepare and intercept. I will board them myself." The Cathar battlecruiser chariot of flame rose through the atmosphere, streaking toward orbit with a roar that split the sky. Inside, Cathar warriors bristled with anticipation. Boarding was routine, but to board something unknown and unafraid, that was exhilarating. The human vessel came into view, a sleek silver wedge, vastly smaller than the Cathar's ship, bearing no visible weapons. Sharnak narrowed his eyes. There was no attempt to flee, no shields raised, just calm, measured approach. The docking bay sealed. Sharnak stepped into the boarding tunnel, claws flexed. He expected groveling diplomats, weaklings, creatures begging not to be added to the long list of species who bowed before the Cathar. What he found instead made him pause. A woman stood at the end of the tunnel. Human, he assumed. About 2 meters tall in a pressure suit, short brown hair, olive skin, dark eyes that held no fear. Behind her stood other humans, tense but not panicked. There were no weapons raised, no signs of retreat. She stepped forward. "I'm Commander Elena Voss of the United Earth Systems. We come in peace and with caution." Sharnak tilted his head. Her tone wasn't one of submission. It was level, deliberate. A negotiation, not a plea. "And why," he rumbled, "does your kind enter Cathar space uninvited, human?" "Because we heard stories," Elena said, "of predators, of the strongest Deathworld species in the galaxy. We wanted to see if it was true." The room went still. No one had ever spoken to Sharnak like that. She wasn't threatening him. She was challenging his legend. Sharnak stepped forward, looming over her, twice her height. He inhaled, measuring her scent, her composure. He saw the tension in her limbs, coiled, not afraid, like a predator sizing up another. "Interesting. You wish to learn our strength?" he said, teeth glinting. "Then we will show you. Our ways demand trials. A test of survival. A duel. No weapons. No tricks. Just flesh and fury." Elena glanced back at her crew, then looked up at him and nodded. Agreed. Behind her, the humans gasped. Behind him, the Cathar hissed in excitement. Two Deathworlders would meet not as enemies, but as representatives of monsters made flesh. The outcome wouldn't just decide the future of two species. It would change the balance of power in the galaxy. Not so fragile. The duel was scheduled to take place on the surface of Gortha's spine, a narrow ridge of obsidian stone exposed to Theta 9's worst elements. Gravity here was 2.7 times Earth normal. Wind screamed across the plateau at 140 kilometers per hour, carrying acid grit that could strip flesh. It was a place meant to kill anything unworthy, which of course was the point. Commander Elena Voss stood alone on the far side of the ridge, visor locked, internal servos in her combat suit humming quietly. Her team had argued against this, furiously. Even her science officer begged her to reconsider. But Elena understood something that went beyond tactics or protocols. You don't negotiate with predators by smiling. You negotiate by showing teeth. Across the ridge, High Commander Sharnak approached without armor, wearing only the ceremonial covered dueling belt. The wind howled against his armored hide, but he strode forward with the confidence of a being who had never known fear. He stopped 20 meters away, eyes narrowing at the human. "That suit of yours, will it break when I crush you?" Elena didn't flinch. "It amplifies my strength just enough to keep me from dying." "You wanted a duel, not a corpse." Sharnak gave a short, guttural laugh. "Good." He extended a clawed hand and raked it across the black stone, carving a deep trench with ease. Then let the trial begin. A horn blared across the canyon. The air cracked as the duel began. Sharnak charged. His speed was terrifying. Each stride covered meters, his talons gouging stone. Elena activated her stabilizers and sidestepped, just barely avoiding a bone-shattering swipe. Her suit screamed warnings. She launched a counter-kick at his side. It connected and did absolutely nothing. Sharnak didn't even flinch. He whirled and slammed a fist in her chest. The impact hurled Elena backward, crashing into a jagged rock outcrop. Her HUD flickered, ribs possibly cracked, air supply stable, vision blurred. But she got up. Pain was something every human from Earth understood, especially those who trained to fight on the most hostile world in known space. Pain meant you were still alive. Elena spit blood and reset her footing. "That all you got?" Sharnak's grin widened. Again he charged, this time with feints, sweeping claws, and deceptive spins. Elena ducked under a hook, rolled across the stone, and delivered a low punch to his knee joint. The suit transferred momentum perfectly. Sharnak stumbled for the first time. Not much, but enough. He looked down at her with something new in his eyes. Recognition. This wasn't prey. This was something that had climbed to the top of its own death world, too. The fight dragged on. Elena's bones ached. Sharnak bled from a shallow cut near his shoulder. Neither gave in. Sharnak's strikes were becoming less theatrical, more focused. He respected her now. That made him more dangerous, but also proved her point. After 10 brutal minutes, they stood apart, both gasping, bleeding, bruised. Elena's suit had 3 cracked servos. She was running on sheer willpower, but she was still standing, and so was Sharnak. He stepped forward, blood dripping from his shoulder. "You do not win." Elena nodded. "I don't lose either." There was a long silence. The wind howled. Acid grit scoured their suits. Far above, both crews watched with bated breath. Finally, Sharnak placed a clawed fist to his chest in a Cathar gesture of respect. "You are worthy." Elena returned the gesture with a sharp military salute. Likewise, at that moment, something ancient shifted between them. It wasn't peace. Not yet, but it was mutual recognition. 2 monsters who had tested one another, and neither had broken. Later, as they returned to their ships, the Cathar warriors watched their commander in stunned silence. Never before had a non-Cathar survived the trial ridge. The humans were quiet too, shocked, awed, but Elena just smiled through the blood, because she knew this was how peace was earned, not by words, but by surviving the war that never had to be fought. In the eyes of equals, High Commander Sharnak sat in silence. The council chamber aboard the Chariot of Flame was quiet, except for the low hum of the ship's power core. Around him, senior Cathar warlords watched the replay of the duel for the 3rd time. Every movement was analyzed. Elena's footwork, her use of terrain, her refusal to yield even after suffering injuries that would have left most aliens incapacitated. "She is not as strong as you," said Warlord Dranik, breaking the silence. "Not even close." Sharnak grunted. "Strength alone did not bring her here." "She is soft," another growled. "The humans rely on tools." "Machines." "No," Sharnak said, standing. She uses what her world gave her. As we do, the room quieted. She stood against me in gravity that should have broken her bones. She fought through pain, not with rage, but with control. That is not softness. That is power of a different kind. He turned, looking at the others. Tell me, how many of our enemies have ever understood what we are? Fewer still have faced it and survived. She did. Warlord Dranik leaned back, thinking. You mean to offer them alliance? I mean to offer respect, Sharnak said. The rest may come later. Aboard the human ship UES Frontier, Elena lay on a medical bed, bruised but alive. Her ribs were wrapped, and her right shoulder had been dislocated during the final exchange, but she was smiling. Her second-in-command, Lieutenant Merrick, stood beside her. So, how do you feel about picking fights with apex predators now? Elena chuckled, wincing. It wasn't a fight. It was a conversation with fists. Merrick crossed his arms. We've already received 2 communications from Cathar envoys. They're asking for a diplomatic relay on neutral ground. That's not how these things usually go. Elena nodded. That's because they don't see us the way they see the others. The Cathar don't want to dominate. They want to test. And now they've seen we're not breakable. The medtech adjusted her sling and stepped away. Commander, Merrick said carefully, what if they are planning something? What if the duel was just a show? Elena looked up. It doesn't matter. We proved we belong at the table. Now we use that. We don't bow, but we don't provoke. We stand. That's all they ever wanted to see. The summit took place 3 days later, aboard an orbital station between Theta 9 and the Cathar War Moon. The station had never hosted 2 Deathworlder species before. Engineers reinforced the bulkheads. Atmospheric controls were adjusted. Medical teams were on standby. But no one could predict how it would go. Sharnak arrived with his honor guard. Elena arrived with hers, unarmed but confident. In the Great Hall, they faced each other once more. This time not as combatants, but as ambassadors. A Cathar elder, ancient and gnarled, stood between them. You have faced each other in the trial. You did not fall. You did not flinch. That alone is worthy of remembrance. Elena bowed her head respectfully. We came seeking contact. What we found was kinship. Our worlds tried to kill us and failed. Sharnak stepped forward, claws folded. We believed we were alone in the galaxy. That only the Cathar knew what it meant to earn every breath. But now we see, Earth forged its own monsters. A murmur rippled through the Cathar. Elena's voice was steady. Not monsters, survivors. Sharnak's eyes gleamed. Then perhaps it is time the galaxy saw what happens when survivors stand together. The elder raised a ceremonial staff. Let be known, the Cathar and the humans will not war. They will not conquer. They will walk side by side, as 2 flames born of different hells. That night, as Elena sat alone in the observation deck, watching Theta 9 spin slowly beneath the stars, Sharnak entered without ceremony. No guards, he observed. I don't think you'll stab me in the back, she said. He made a sound halfway between a grunt and a chuckle. You would see it coming. They stood together in silence for a while, the 2 strongest predators of their species, no longer enemies, no longer strangers. You know, Elena said finally, this changes everything. Sharnak nodded. Let the galaxy tremble. For now, the true Deathworlders walk as one. The message echoes. The galaxy noticed. Within a solar cycle, footage of the duel between Commander Elena Voss and High Commander Sharnak spread across neutral networks and black market channels. Dozens of civilizations watched in stunned silence as a human woman stood against a Cathar apex warrior and didn't die. For the weaker species, it sparked hope. For the powerful ones, it bred fear. No one had expected humanity to matter. Earth was isolated, its presence in galactic politics minor. But after the trial on Gortha's spine, Earth was no longer seen as a curiosity. They were seen as dangerous. In the high towers of the Varnathi Congress, where crystalline beings whispered to one another through color-coded pulses, an emergency session was called. Are they mad? One delegate pulsed in alarm. The Cathar don't ally. They consume. The humans earned something we never could. another replied darkly. Respect. A third delegate sent a quiet ripple of fear. Then we must act, before their alliance solidifies. And in the shadows of galactic diplomacy, knives were quietly unsheathed. On Earth, the United Earth Systems Council convened in Geneva, the mood tense. Commander Voss exceeded her mission brief, one admiral growled. Her actions could have triggered a war. But they didn't, said Secretary Arjun Rao, calmly sipping tea. Instead, she did what no diplomat or general has ever done. She made the Cathar see us as equals. But what cost? Now half the galactic powers are watching us like we're the next Cathar. Rao leaned forward. Good. Let them watch. Let them hesitate. Across the table, a silent figure spoke. General Mei Ling, head of Earth's Defense Initiative. She showed them what we are, the general said. Not conquerors, not prey, just survivors too stubborn to die. That kind of reputation is worth its weight in warships. Back aboard the Chariot of Flame, Sharnak stood before a war map of known space. Lines and markers shimmered across the projection, showing alliances, conflicts, and trade routes. At the edge of the display, Earth blinked softly. A small world, muttered Warlord Dranik behind him. Insignificant. Until now. Sharnak didn't reply for a moment. Then, insignificant fire can still ignite a forest. He turned away from the map and walked toward the comms chamber. Send the message, he ordered, to all Cathar outposts, to our vassals, even to our rivals. The operator hesitated. What message, High Commander? Sharnak's voice rumbled like distant thunder. The Cathar recognized the strength of humanity. Hostility toward them is now hostility toward us. That message rippled outward like a shockwave. Within days, minor warlords who had once preyed on human colonies withdrew. Pirate factions recalibrated their targets. Entire diplomatic missions were abruptly rescheduled. And at the center of the storm stood two species once thought to be enemies, now linked by blood and bone and pain. Back on the neutral station orbiting Theta 9, Commander Elena Voss sat in a briefing with her crew. I'm being reassigned, she said. Effective immediately. A ripple of surprise passed through the room. Where to? Asked Lieutenant Merrick. To lead a joint task force, she said. Human and Cathar. Merrick raised an eyebrow. You mean you're going with them? Elena nodded. Not to fight, to explore. The Cathar have scouted only a third of their own borders. They want help. Our tech. Our instincts. Our madness, I suppose. And you trust them? Another officer asked. Elena smiled faintly. I trust what we earned. Respect is a fragile thing, but it's real, and it's ours now. As the crew absorbed the weight of her words, the stars beyond the observation glass seemed just a little brighter. Later, in the hangar, as she boarded the Cathar shuttle, Sharnak stood waiting. You still limp, he noted. You still bleed, she shot back. They grinned at each other like old war dogs. Sharnak stepped beside her. What we do next will make echoes across centuries. I know, Elena said, but I think we're ready. They walked into the shuttle together. Two Deathworlders, not as rivals, not even as soldiers, but as symbols of a new kind of future. Not forged in dominance or submission, but in mutual survival.